A very good afternoon to all our viewers. Welcome to today's webinar. Last year at RMAI, we had conducted two webinar series captioned as Compass 1 and Compass 2. The apt names were given by our own Mr. Rajkumar Jha. Thanks, Mr. Jha. I think all the sessions went off very, very well. They were very successful. When now we step into the new year and when we are also getting to the normalcy, it is time to strategize our future, and that can only happen when we look back to the decade behind us. I think the decade behind us gave a lot of learning. It made a lot of changes in the rural domain, and I am very confident that this becomes a kind of a source of our knowledge to look into our future. With these changes in mind and the huge scope of learning available, we have initiated this new webinar named The Decade of Change. The decade has really taught us a lot, and perhaps the way of doing rural marketing has undergone a big change during this period. Our National Advisory Council Chairman, Mr. Sanjay Kaul, has helped in the conceptualization and ideation process. Our eminent National Advisory Council members, our respective executive committee members, our Vice President, Honorary General Secretary, and Honorary Treasurer, I think all of them have contributed in giving this project a shape. Our Secretariat team is going to execute the series. My sincere thanks to all of them, and also a special gratitude to the speakers who have agreed to be on our panel. Today we start our first session with none other than Mr. Harish Bijoor Mr. He is also a very close associate and well-wisher of RMAI. I would now like to request Mr. Puneet Vidyarthi, our National Advisory Council member, to take today's session forward. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, our esteems. We are extremely happy to have you with us today. The subject and the series which Mr. Chakravarti has said is extremely interesting, and in many ways it's path-breaking. And what a day to start this new web series, a new year. So wish you also a very happy new year to all of us. This webinar series which RMAI has curated for all of us actually is going to talk a lot about on different subjects, what has changed over the period of time, specifically in last one decade in the context of Indian market and specifically the rural market. Uh, today, I'll be taking up couple of points, and we will be discussing with our eminent speaker, whom I'm going to introduce in a minute or so, uh, about some specific, uh, issues or specific characteristics which have happened, specific milestones which have happened over the last 10 years and slightly beyond. And we will also try and take a peep into the future, and try and understand that how things are will look like in the times to come. So we'll try and cover both the past as well as a bit of future. Uh, in Indian context, if you go through the data, and there's a lot of data available, uh, I've just picked up couple of things. So. The number of people engaged in rural economy, specifically the agriculture economy, which was the original starting point of rural economy, uh, has actually gone double over the last 30-40 years. And in the similar time, the land tract size has actually gone more than three times. uh, what does it mean? There's been a couple of drivers for that, for this kind of phenomena, the change in tenancy laws, the smaller land holdings, the growing family size, the growing population. What it actually means is the number of people, the income they are holding is has gone up significantly over the period of last couple of decades. When it comes to people, the linked thing is the economy, the transaction, and when it comes to transaction, there has to be a marketing around it. Today, I have a speaker with us who doesn't require actually any introduction. He's an institution by himself, but for the benefit of all of us, I'll just read out a couple of lines about our guest today. Our guest, Mr. Harish Bijoor. He's a brand guru under of a boutique consulting outfit, I would say, Harish Bijoor Consults. Mr. Harish Bijoor, he doesn't require any introduction. He has got presence through his consulting group in the markets of Hong Kong, Seattle, London, Istanbul, Dubai, and obviously Indian subcontinent. His very impressive career, has been into different shades, like FMCG, telecom, consumer durables. He's a thinker. He's a marketing practitioner, and he's a consultant who's ahead of curve year on year. That's very interesting. He's a public speaker, and he has got audience across the globe. Uh, he also is a permanent faculty in Indian School of Business, Hyderabad and Mohali. I think with ISB he's associated with the last 20 years. Uh, he has almost close to done 16,000 hours of public speaking. So therefore, he's, as I said, he's an institution by himself. He has written a couple of books. The notable ones are The Marketing Trends, Smart Insights into the World of Indian Business. He's also writing a book nowadays by the name of Brand Irrationals, a fundamental journey into the brand think. And also he's been commissioned to write a book on consumer service mechanisms. Mr. Bijoor is very actively involved in research relating to rural consumer behaviors, rural retail networks, and trade mechanisms at play. He's leading a research which involves 84,850 consumers all across India, and the duration of this research is 6 years. So he's doing some real serious fundamental work into the space of rural. Uh, so, as I said, he's a strategic marketing. He's a thinker. He's a consultant, and he's an institution by himself. I welcome you, Mr. Harish,
Thank you.
to this show. Great.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you, Puneet,
yes,
for that very generous introduction. Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending where the audience is joining from. Yeah.
fantastic. Without wasting, and as I just started by saying, in the last couple of decades, there's a lot of things have changed in the Indian consumer space with respect to specifically in the rural market area. There had been couple of drivers, and the couple of them which I have listed down is definitely the availability of finance, and the way financing in rural India has moved from uh, keeping the farmers insulated from the adversities of annual cycles to asset financing, how it is changing, how the insurance has played its role, and also because of the advancements in the crop cycles itself, or the technology behind it, the dependence on summer monsoon has gone down. So we have seen in the decades of 1990s and 2000, the annual crop has been kind of insulated with respect to the fluctuations in monsoon. But what is more important, and we have seen, and that's probably I see is the turning point where rural marketing has been seen as a serious subject, is probably around when Lehman Brothers crisis happened globally. And we've seen that around year 2008, the crisis was a wake up call for India, basically to boost its rural market expenditure and the developments, as India was hardly unscathed by the crisis and the recessions. I mean, I would say that downsize was far better contained uh, in rural India, and because of rural India in India compared to the developed world. So, Harish, what are your insights on this exception?
Okay, Puneet, firstly, I think you started at the right point of time, which is 2008. And the Lehman Brothers crisis was a big one. I still remember how Lehman Brothers, which was an organization of such great size and such great respect, started to become a meme all over. Yes, in 2008, we didn't have, digital mediums as we have today with social media and the memes coming out. But I still remember walking on the streets of Paris one fine day after the Lehman Brothers crash, just one day after it, and I saw two young girls wearing T-shirts which said Lehman Sisters and walking around. And there were people who were looking at them and laughing, and the girls themselves were laughing because Lehman Brothers had been made a joke of. So the big had collapsed and the small was laughing at it. So to an extent, 2008 became an epoch here when in India, all of us realized that, it's a very connected world. And in a connected world, what really happens is when Big Brother falls, there is a domino effect which affects literally every aspect of life. But what happened in 2008 and after that is that the domino effect was actually started happening in urban markets. Urban markets went into a tizzy. Some of the best consumer marketing companies in India, many of them members of RMAI today, actually were getting, FMCG had a growth rate of about 6.6% in urban areas. And FMCG, the very same company, had a growth rate of 21.6% in rural markets. So what happened is the domino started collapsing from the Western world and fell and fell and fell, and it stopped at urban markets. In urban markets, it met a resistance wall. And guess what? This resistance wall was really the wall of rural markets because rural markets were so insulated, so they were so different, they were so distanced, and the very fact that rural markets were rustic helped us. This rusticity of rural markets, this being divorced from the connection to the most global of global markets, helped rural markets sustain themselves. So I think 2008 became a turning point for sure. And I think, people started talking about insulated India and 61 point, and at that point of time, 72% of the market of India was insulated because 72 was rural and 28 was urban. While urban got hit, rural got insulated. Overall, the GDP of the country grew. And I think people started focusing on rural. And going back to Puneet's point, what you just raised, Puneet, number of people in rural marketing had doubled. In fact, I have a number that says that number of people in rural marketing in 2008, I've taken that same year. If they were X in 2020, which is, a 12-year period, we are really talking of it having gone 2.6X. Forget numbers. Look at the quality of people. Look around at RMAI itself, the institution which is spearheading a lot of thinking, a lot of strategizing, and a lot of focus on rural marketing. Look around. RMAI possibly has some of the most involved in rural marketing. This wasn't the case 30 years ago when I started in rural marketing. I still remember the best of companies sent their least equipped of people to look after rural marketing, whereas the more equipped people were sent for urban marketing. So being in rural marketing then was a punishment, and today it's a huge joy. Puneet.
I think that's absolutely absolutely correct. And I remember the various platforms which RMI has created over the years, and I had been associated with RMI for I think more than 3 years or so. And evolution which we have seen in RMI's lens is actually a testimony of what you have said. Uh, I still remember in 2005, 2006, there used to be very few books on one of Mr. Pradeep Kashyap's book on rural marketing was kind of a textbook. But today you see there's a lot of literature, a lot of insights which are available. Uh, if I define, and since both of us are marketeers, so I'll probably my next question I'll take you through the sphere. The promotion of products in rural marketing, in rural markets, is basically the use of different marketing techniques in rural markets compared to urban markets. Of late, the focus is also now coming to providing better standard of living and quality of life in rural market. So in that context, if we see the decade of 2020 is a kind of a decade of digitalization, and recent COVID pandemic has really paced up the acceptance of Indians to go digital, and hence the digital market is taking even more relevance in the whole context, and its scope has widened when it comes to consumer marketing through digital tools. So how do you celebrate, Harish, this revolutionary change?
Okay, Puneet, if you look at it, we have moved from rustic rural to suave rural. And suave rural is really using technology to get that much more rural in terms of visibility, in terms of traction, in terms of distribution systems, in terms of the ability to read data and deliver. So one of the big changes that we witness today is the fact that rural markets are being looked at with a greater degree of sensitivity. And this sensitivity does not come from qualitative research, but it comes from quantitative data. It's crazy because there was a time when you and I, as marketing people, grew up and studied, and we were taught that, hey, there is this science called qualitative research, and then there's quantitative research. And maybe there's something else called holistic research, but let's talk about qualitative and quantitative. Now, qualitative was something we used in rural markets a lot because you couldn't study rural markets in a quantitative manner because the number of people in rural markets were too many. There were 2,800, and there are 2,800 what I would call urban agglomeration and urban agglomeration clusters in India. Only 2,800. But there are 6 lakh 43,700, 643,700 villages in this country. So how do you enter 6 lakh 43,700 villages, if I am to use lackism as a way of defining it, 643,700? How do you go to so many villages and do quantitative stuff? It's difficult. So what's the best thing to do? You go data from north, east, west, south, central, and then aggregate. And most of the time, we fell between many stools. Data wasn't correct. So quantitative data never came out of the rural market. But today, you see the big change that we have seen in the decade is that data is king. And guess what? Quantitative data is today trapped by digital devices and digital mechanisms. So I depend a real lot, a lot on understanding people as what they do, when they do, how they do, where they do, with what attitude they do, with what frequency they do. And I can get all of this out of quantitative data, not necessarily quality. So data is now king. Data is certainly the new oil, and digitalism, as I call it, is the new religion. Digitalism. Every few years, every few decades, you have a new religion coming by. We have had, capitalism, we have had communism, fascism. There are 26 of them. And the 20th is really what I call digitalism. Digitalism is the new religion. You and I are connected animals. Every one of us is a digital person. Everyone with a mobile phone in rural markets is a digital person. And never mind whether it's a smartphone or a push button phone, everybody is connected. Some of the most active, platforms in rural India are, the biggest one has been closed down, which is TikTok. I went into Punjab and I remember going into the villages of Punjab around Mohali and near Amritsar. And I went into some 14 to 15 villages and came out with data which said 86.4% of all people in the villages who have a phone a smartphone, or on TikTok. Now TikTok got banned, but then the next, pecking order is occupied by YouTube. YouTube is something that reaches the old people, the very old people, and the very young people with equanimity. Because my YouTube research simply says that in rural markets, the young, the very young, the 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old is using it for education purposes. And guess what? The very old, the 80 plus people are also using it for n numbers of entertainment options. Some of the best recipes from across the world, globally, including ravioli, is actually practiced and used in rural markets and made in rural markets because they're connected to YouTube. So YouTube, Insta, Twitter, each one of these have become platforms. Facebook, you walk out of any village, and I go to a lot of villages. I look like an urban person, so when I'm leaving the village, the guys come up to you and say, sir, will you do friendship with me on Facebook? Will you friend me on Facebook? Wonderful, yeah. So Facebook, so digital devices, digital platforms, digital applications, these have really made huge inroads into rural markets. And therefore, I think, the rural markets are set to move from the rustic to the suave. And the suave understanding comes from quantitative data mining of rural people married to qualitative data, which will pick the way we used to pick in the old days. So the new days are about quantitative.
Fantastic. You have any specific example in mind, if any brand has used this specifically to get successful in the rural sphere? Any top of the mind
Some of
recall
the
you have?
some of the great brands which actually do brilliant, good stuff are some of the oldest brands that have been in rural markets. Lifebuoy is a classic example. If you really look at it, what does a carbolic soap do in rural markets? I mean, in the old days, it was doing things in a different way. Today, they do it in a different manner. Take distribution, for instance, because distribution is very close to my heart. I work with people who are interested in creating new pathways into rural markets. And guess what? In the older days, there was just one distribution system, what I derogatorily used to call the elementary canal system of distribution, which is, the food pipe, food goes into the mouth, the esophagus, and then ends up where? So if you look at it, typically today there are many multi formats for distribution. Okay. And that is where are making a difference. Big companies like HUL have invested 30 plus years ago into their project Shakti. Shakti Amma, Shakti Man, everything that came by, that became a parallel system of distribution. In addition, some of the newer distribution pieces we have taken into the market as old as 8-9 years ago is we've taken assisted e-commerce into rural markets. And I think this was done 9 years ago. We went in with a client and said that hey, listen guys, if people cannot come to you, you must go to the people. Okay, so out here was a player who was a large shop, okay, who was actually doing a lot of garments, etc., etc. So we went and we took these Akash iPads and got the entire platform installed on Akash iPads. The idea was simply this: rural people do not have smartphones, they do not have iPads. Possibly then, in those days, 8 years ago, they were not too happy to operate on an app. They distrusted big city people, as all rural people do, and as all urban people don't ever understand, because we think we are the epitome of integrity, and when we go there, they must trust us and they will trust us. They don't. If you look at it, we took this app and we said that they don't have a mobile phone, they aren't on apps, they don't have the capability of being on it. And therefore, we got in people, about 6,000 people all across the country with iPads, and these iPads were loaded with the app, and these people would go house to house. So they'll go and knock on a door, and then they'll talk to the 5.5 people in that house and say that, hey, listen, guys, I'm a shop. And they'd laugh. How can you be a shop? A shop, I know how it looks. They'd show the iPad, and on the iPad, they would flick and flick and flick and show them all the goodies of the Western world. Western, yeah, the big city world, the big shop world, the modern designs, and high quality stuff as they would imagine it to be. So we'd show that, and then we'd say, you want to pick something, you can. So each of these Akash tablet guys was empowered with a credit card which had loaded amount of 10,000 given to them earlier, and then what they have to do is they show the entire store to the person in the house, and then a person picks what they want from that shop, and maybe three items they pick. The total value is about 800 rupees. The boy actually collects 800 rupees from them. After he receives 800, he uses his credit card and orders online, and the stock will reach that village post office by in 7 days. The 7 days was the promise given. It would reach at times in 4 days, because depending where it was coming from. And this is beautiful. The first time the bill was 800. The second time they would wait for the guy to come again, and he'd come only after 1 month. And there was a designated time. The shop is coming to me. And that second bill deepened. I have data which says that the first bill size that we got all across the country was all of 211 rupees, average 211. The second bill was 860 rupees. The third bill went to 2,200 rupees and stabilized at 2,200 rupees per home, which meant that as credibility builds, they got onto the platform. And after a period of time, now what we have done is after 8 years, we have handed over the platform to them, because now they have smartphones. Now they know what to do things on their own. I don't need intermediated e-commerce to go and do stuff. So distribution wise, this is just the third thing I'm telling you. There are 6 other platforms which we have looked at. And I think that's going to be the beauty of the decade ahead of us, when new distribution formats, multi-channel distribution formats for rural markets are going to go up. I work with cement companies, and cement companies have traditionally used, age-old distributor-oriented distribution systems. Wait for it as things change. Wait for it as technology boosts up. For cement companies, we do D2C distribution systems, direct to consumer. And guess what? It's working beautifully, because people buy cement once in a while to build a home, and they buy it only once in their lifetime even, because that's the beauty of cement. It must be bought only once. Okay. And when it's bought, they will buy maybe 20 bags of cement, and 20 bags is good for a D2C business. So disintermediation occurring, local distributors are upset in rural markets, of course, but D2C means I save 32% margins when I send stock out. Again, let me stop. That is the fourth one that I spoke about. There are 5 more which we are experimenting with, and many of them are likely to work. Puneet.
Yeah, sure. Great. I think that's a great insight. And I really have noted down digitalization is a new religion. I mean, that's something I have picked up in the last 5 minutes. So, and you actually brought me to a very interesting point, which is the next question I'm going to ask you as well, which actually comes from the case which you just spelled out. So what we have seen that the between 1960 and 1990, it was largely a time of green revolution. The focus was on more on high yield. There was a rise of income. People have seen there is a the TV network was the big thing. The telephone was a big thing. The aspirations of people have went around that. The packaging revolution, I have actually noted in my notes that that was also one of the big drivers of change in the rural areas. Era of 90 onwards till 2000s, and where we saw the 4P of marketing getting translated to 4As in rural marketing, and things like that. And then slowly we saw in the last 10 years, markets are both hub sourcing and distribution, and you have also narrated a case around that. And the transaction is happening both in both the directions. I mean, it's not only a one-way transaction which is happening; it's in both the directions. And I guess that is the reason why we saw that 2019 the rural spending has overtaken urban spending in Indian context, which means that the rural growth is the silver lining, and probably one of the largest silver lining in these recent years. So my question to you is, Harish, is that should this be an indicator for companies to leverage the rural buoyancy by increasing the reach and penetration of low unit price products not only in the consumer product, what Mr. Prahlad has spoken about, the theory of bottom pyramid, but also the premium products and the value portfolios.
Yeah. Well, at this given point of time, Puneet, I do believe the theory of bottom of the pyramid no longer exists.
Yeah.
Because, I think we're really talking of a cylinder, and this cylinder is going to eventually become an inverted pyramid of a different kind. Because what's really happening is rural markets have all the money. They've always had the money. In fact, if I take a look at the pyramid of the old pyramid, which Dr. Prahlad built, right at the top of the pyramid was top of the pyramid people, that is the high income group, middle income group in the middle, and right at the bottom, a very large bottom of the pyramid. Now that's changing. The composition of that itself is changing because there's a fallacy in that one pyramid. And that fallacy is that people at the bottom of the pyramid are also engaging in commerce, but they're engaging in a different kind of commerce. And the kind of commerce they engage in is what I call barter. Because barter is big, big stuff in rural markets. The power, the potential of barter is totally underestimated. I do work for some fintech companies because fintech guys are totally involved with rural markets because this is where they want to tap a lot of potential. If you look at it, barter is big, big stuff. Now, what am I doing? Big challenge which most people face when they enter rural markets. Apps don't do very well because if you have to pay by check or if you pay by a bank or through a bank or a credit card or even by Paytm, there is a little bit of resistance. And therefore, because this is a cash economy, please understand that. The reality is that rural is a cash economy. A whole lot of cash is brought and items are bought, including something as big as a Mahindra Bolero. It's quite likely that a farmer brings a big gunny bag filled with cash and tries to buy that Bolero with that particular a part of the gunny bag of cash. If you look at it, how do you transition from cash to check, to cash to plastic? The idea is the paradigm is everybody must move from cash to check. The breaking of the paradigm is what I'm attempting in markets, which is to say, hey, let's get back to barter, guys. Because see, if rural markets are used to barter, let's propitiate and propagate barter deeper and wider. A person actually wants milk in a rural market and he's got wheat and he exchanges milk, and that is economic activity, economic value add, EVA happening. But that is not tapped onto the mainstream. That's not tapped in the data that we capture. But then that is commerce. Of the pyramid, there's plenty of commerce, and most of the commerce is barter. Now, can you instigate barter to get onto a different level altogether? Okay, my dear rural friend, you're not happy with non-cash transactions, but do you want to go to stock transactions? What you make versus what you want, and can there be an exchange? And I'm working on something like this, which says that hey, can we create an exchange where literally every item that you and I use has an exchange ratio which is set up. And can barter occur? And can barter be simple barter, complicated barter, value barter, barter which is futures barter, options barter, put barter? Bring in the best devices from the world of fintech and take it to rural markets and try to create some excitement there. So there's plenty of stuff happening out here. Just one last point on that is the fact that, hey, listen, a very important point for us to understand is that there's a big fact in our lives, and this is a happy fact. The happy fact is the fact that we live in India. There's a great degree of happiness to be living in India because India is a stable economy. India is an economy which is growing, yes, and shrinking and growing, but it's a stable state economy. To an extent, if I look at countries, our immediate neighbor Sri Lanka is going through one of the worst crisis points in its entire history today. Okay, leave our immediate neighbor, let's go to a war-torn Ukraine. Okay, the kind of trouble many countries are going through, India is blessed not to be going through. So the first thing is thank God and thank the heavens and thank the governments and thank policies, thanks philosophies, thank anybody you want, but be grateful that we live in India. Now, second point to be grateful because we live in India is the fact that, please note this with capitals and with highlighted twice and etc. All businesses converge into India fundamentally because for all businesses globally, worldwide, India is a terrific, terrific market. We're the second largest populated country in the world, and we're going to become the first largest very, very soon. We are 1.4 billion people out here, okay? And that's my strength. So all businesses converge into India, okay? The second aspect to keep in mind is all businesses will also diverge out of India. Now, look at it this way. I have a terrific rural market which produces the best rural produce, but businesses do not diverge out of rural. Businesses at this point of time diverge out of rural only up to urban markets. And then the urban marketer takes over and then he further diverges it outside. Now, if I can cut the hegemony of the urban middleman, the urban market middleman, and if I can say that rural markets will divert straight into the global world, can you imagine the prosperity you, I, RMI, all of us can bring to the guy sitting in rural markets? Because please note, one of the biggest disasters of a rural person is the fact that he's fleeced. India is a nation of middlemen. There's a first party, there's a second party, there's a third party. The point is, we need the first party, we need the third party, the second party is a huge question. So I'm saying disintermediation is a way. All businesses converge into India, and all businesses must also diverge out of India. All businesses converge into rural India, and all rural businesses must diverge out into the entire world at large. Is it possible? I'm actually working on two projects in this space. And if we can show results out in these two spaces, I think we can create examples for the best rural markets to go totally global and to create that 32% gain, which is today a 32% net loss for the rural person.
Yeah, I think that's a really great insight, Harish, and I think the barter is used as a great tool to revolutionize the economy. That's something very interesting. So, uh, in your and you actually raised a very interesting point about the ability or the scope for a rural person to be contributing into the Indian economy and Indian GDP can actually go multifold once we can sort out these intermediaries story. Uh, I can cite my example in my one of my in my career. I think I've been fortunate to be working on the projects where we focused on the entrepreneurship creation in the rural space. Through I mean, and creating. Making him enabled to create the money or the livelihood for a person by himself and not depending upon somebody else giving him a job. And specifically in the sector I work, the construction equipment, that concept has worked pretty well. So that has been the learning so far. So my next couple of questions before I come to you, Harish, I request audience also to keep posting the questions should they have any suggestions or any comments should they have. We'll be happy to answer some of these questions and also try and weave in some of your points into the speech which Harish has been giving. So my next couple of questions are basically future looking, and it's not only the decade which has gone by. I mean, maybe taking some of the cues or learnings from the what we have gone through in the last 10 15 years and how we can further project it in future. So my first question I'm coming to is like how do you see or how do you portray the future of marketing practices years from now on, and what a new or a young marketeer should be doing, or rather young, I include myself as young, should be doing now to be prepared for the upcoming challenges due to the advancement in technology, the virtual experience, And I've read a couple of your recent work about the metaverse. So how would you take the metaverse and the virtual experience into the rural space, and what difference can it make?
Okay, this excites me, Puneet, because I'm as young as you are. And if you really look at it, I want to look at the future as the only thing that you and I have in rural markets. Fundamentally, because, the future is more exciting by a huge multiple than the past, because the past is has been a bit rustic. It's becoming suave, and I think the future is going to be super suave for rural markets. So in the future, the first thing I'm seeing is a greater degree of attention to rural markets. In the old days, people would tell me, let me give you an example. I started teaching rural marketing as a course at the Indian School of Business at Hyderabad 20 years ago when the school first started. So I taught some batches. If you really look at it, when I started, in my head, I had a thought that, hey, listen, at the point of independence, rural markets were a large portion of the market, and urban was small. Rural shrunk, urban grew, rural shrunk, and eventually there will come a time in 20 years when India will only be 12% rural and it will be 88% urban. I was so wrong. I was so wrong. I taught the 20th year of the course, which was the year before last. And if you look at it, the future is even more aggressive. And the kind of interest people have in rural markets is deepening. So the first thing that's going to happen is the number of people in rural marketing is going to bloom by a factor of 5.5, which means to say that RMAI membership is going to go up by 5.5 times. Okay, I hope so. So if you look at it, interest in rural marketing is going to be back because this is unique space. Rural is a unique geography, and unique geographies are difficult to come by. Rural is a holistic geography. Look at what happened during the pandemic. Everybody fled from urban areas into rural areas. Rural tourism is big time stuff today, and I don't think we're channelizing our efforts enough, into bringing in inbound tourists from overseas. Once COVID clears up, take it from me, COVID post-COVID tourism into rural areas is going to become a big hit. People are owning lands back in rural areas. Urban people want to go and get a piece of land on which they'll build their own house or own hut or whatever they want to build in rural areas. Look at the fact that people are working from home and people are working from the remotest villages. I do work with an IT company where we have created 42 hubs for for people to come in once in 3 months in the country. Okay, once in 3 months they come into a hub, and the hub is a nice, glass and steel kind of an office which is made. They'll come in by rotation to get an office feel with air conditioning, etc. The rest of the time they're going to be working from their villages, and they have enough boosted Wi-Fi, and they're working from their own towns. So a person living in a village does not need to dissociate himself, herself, themselves from the local sambar that my mother makes in the village to the idlis that come particular area to literally everything, the local milieu. So local will hopefully remain local. And this brain drain, which we spoke about, people from rural markets moving to urban markets, only the older people are left in the villages, all the young people have fled, there's more money outside, there's less money inside. All these paradigms must and can be changed. So the future is exciting. And what excites me in the future is technology. I've already told you that data centricity. I'm saying that, I'm going to be learning about people through numbers, through data and quantitative data, as opposed to the qualitative data of one person going into the village, making his, her, or their mind up and saying, this is how rural people are. Qualitative research doesn't give you those answers anymore. Today, it's a function of quantity, data telling me what to do. And data comes from every mobile phone that every human being in rural India is using. And gradually, I'm getting deeper and deeper sets of data from these places. Everything is changing. Rural entertainment is changing. Gaming in rural areas is big stuff, big stuff. If you really go to any nukkad, along with the gossip, you have gaming going. So gossip and gaming, an eclectic combination in these markets. gaming entering it, and some of the Korean games, Japanese games, American games, I mean, entering into markets in a phenomenal manner. Entertainment of every kind. And let me speak of only entertainment which I can speak officially about. Entertainment in terms of cinema, in terms of interactive programs, television programs, OTT, everything going out to them. So if you look at it, all that is happening. Simultaneously, there are going to be other developments which are going to be exciting. One of it is EdTech. I work with one of the big EdTech players. EdTech is going into rural markets in a big way, fundamentally because that's the best way to learn. Village schools don't get the best teachers. The best teacher could be on an app, and that app could actually have programs once in 6 months where all students are brought together, and then there's a physical contact program as well done. So app-based teaching, edtech, medtech. Again, the same thing about medtech is found to be so important. Why must a villager travel something like about 26 kilometers away to a big city or 200 kilometers to a big city to get some testing done? I think, edtech, medtech, where there are platforms which talk to people. There's a platform called Second Opinions that says that, hey, I want to talk to a doctor. Can you get me a doctor? And then everything is done through the network and technology. Entertainment tech, add tech to anything. Okay, energy tech, it goes on and on. So I think that's going to be exciting. Add to it yet another thing, which is the metaverse. And I won't speak about the metaverse because if I dive into the metaverse, I will take 22 to 25 minutes talking about the metaverse. That's how exciting it is for rural markets. Okay, urban markets, there are a lot of marketers who are going through a FOMO, the fear of missing out, and everybody is on the metaverse, wants to be on the metaverse. There's a big rush for it. Rural, there are two players in this country. One is a cement player, one of the large cement, not the largest, but one of the large cement players who I'm working with. And I think you can create some great degree of excitement for rural markets in cement. And the second is a pesticide player, a very large pesticide player, a global pesticide player. Again, it's related to technology. We planted, sensors. The future is about sensors. We planted sensors in the field, and the sensor actually tells you when must you water, when must you not water, when must you use a nitrogenous fertilizer, when must you do different things. And the land is finally talking to the farmer in real terms, in real time. On his app, his parched land is asking, water me today. His pesticide requirement, I need a zinc-based fertilizer. What zinc based? In the old days, the farmer had to understand what his father had said about the land, and if he was still farming, he would keep bring that knowledge in. But today, knowledge systems are tech knowledge systems. So there's a lot of excitement and a huge degree of excitement, but one downside. The one downside is rural must not do what urban people have done. Urban people have gone, and I think we have destroyed some of the good things in life. Take pollution, for instance. I think urban people have gone and set up huge factories. Every factory has a DG set, and every DG set is a polluter. And the population of DG sets in this country, if you look at the numbers, is phenomenal. And now in comes rectification for that. So there is this company called Pi Green Innovations, which brings in something called a carbon cutter. So every DG set will have to have a cutter attached to it in rural markets and urban markets. In rural markets, we have Jaggery units, which create a lot of pollution around. So every DG set will need this. Every boiler set which creates pollution needs to have this. So if you look at it, I think, rural people have also started doing some of the things we urban people do. And those nasty things that we urban people do, we must never allow rural people to replicate. In the sense that let's not pollute the world. Rural is pure, it's pristine, keep it that way. And with purity and by being pristine, still create value for rural markets and make rural prosper. Puneet.
Sure. I think very, very insightful points. I remember one of your talks which I had actually was part of, and you had raised a very, very interesting marketing problem. I don't know whether you remember it or not, but I definitely do remember that probably cockroaches are the oldest problem of this earth, and there are enough solutions available to eliminate cockroaches. ना cockroach खत्म हुए ना cockroach बनाने वाले efforts खत्म हुए. So I still quote it somewhere that there has to be a problem, and as a marketing problem, how do we take that problem? So I'm taking you to the next question. There are a couple of questions on the chat box as well, which I'll take very quickly. But my next question is, as you have mentioned earlier in your talk as well, then there are multiple urban-centric technologies, whether it's AI or IoT or things like that. Today they are largely urban-centric solution providers. Do you see a possibility of a rural-centric blockchain to solve some of the supply chain issues of rural India?
Absolutely. I think, one of the pioneers in this space has been ITC, Agrotech, in the early days. And I think if you really look at the kind of good stuff that they did, it was humongous. But I think we are now moving from that phase to the next phase. And the next phase is really about Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is about all the digital assets that you and I can create, which can get networked and which can actually get actualized, which can actually get paid for. Where NFT is certainly one of it, cryptocurrency, not currency, but crypto tokens, because let's say we don't want crypto to be a currency, but crypto is a token. So crypto tokens, NFTs, I think these are going to be the big ones which are going to redefine the way we're going to connect everybody. So the blockchain is going to be a huge asset going to be using. In fact, there are a couple of players who are actually using it already. I can't share with you that right now because of the confidentiality, the NDAs that I have signed with them. But the point is, there are people who are doing excellent work in rural markets, and some of the best pieces of work will happen in this space. Predictive marketing is the name of the game. Everything predictive. Now, can a cement company actually predict when, what quantity, what grade of cement is required at any location, and can it take care of that need? Now, I think that's where data comes in, and data science is growing up. Data science is no longer a teenager. Data science is a young man.
Absolutely. I have one more question, but I'll take a couple of questions which have come on the chat box first, and then I come to my last question. So one of the question is it's from Mr. Mukesh Ranjan, and he's saying that huge opportunity in rural market, but why not flourishing as fast as urban marketing?
Well, the key point to appreciate, it's a good question. Key point to appreciate is that markets are actually flourishing at a faster pace than urban markets are. Now, I'm not only talking about the pandemic effect and the post pandemic effect when a lot of people went into rural areas and a lot of consumption boomed in those areas. A lot of workers left and went back home and they started working there, and then they also needed to be fed. Migrant labor went back, etc. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the simple fact that consumption and consumptiveness has grown in rural markets. I have data of last year, which is 2020, which really means to say that if you go to a rural cluster in grade A and B, okay, I categorize grade A, B, C, and D. C and D are the most impoverished rural. A and B are the more prosperous rural. B is the average one, and A is the more prosperous of the lot. If you look at, the sale of a carbolic soap called Lifebuoy, how much it sells in that rural market as opposed to what was selling before, how much is it selling in an urban market as before, are very clear. I can't share the numbers with you because I've taken the name of a brand, and it would be incorrect for me to share numbers of that kind. It simply means to say that rural people are waking up to consumption in a big way. Rural people are saying that, hey, listen, I mean, I have the money. Maybe I don't flaunt it like you guys do. If you guys get money, you will go, and the first thing you will go and buy a car. And because you want four wheels, have wheels will drive. And guess what? You guys, people like I, would buy a car on an EMI. Okay. Rural people don't do that. Rural people don't believe in EMI. rural people believe in solid rokda, solid money, solid stuff. And if I have the money, I'll go and buy it. So the flaunt value of urban versus the real value of rural is something we need to respect. Please note, rural people are more real than us urban people. We urban people are looks oriented, flaunt oriented, attitude oriented, how I pronounce my R and my P's and how do I eat with a fork and a spoon and what are the dishes that I eat. Rural people are real and rustic and sober. And I think in this market, you will see consumption has gone up hugely for a lot of those kind of products and services. Rural people are still value conscious. They want to buy stuff that gives you value. Rural people don't buy LUPs anymore, low unit packs. They buy large unit packs. They buy LUPs, but it's not low unit packs, it's large unit packs. Because they do believe a 1 kilogram of tea costs a lot lesser than a 2 rupee packet of tea. And that's true because marketeers understand this. So economy is good for them, but consumption wise, they're very, very big. So the point to appreciate is rural consumption is big, rural consumption is robust, rural consumption is less understood than ever before. And rural is all about barter even today. And if I have my way, I will get rural on the fast track of barter by 2027. Okay.
Wow,
That's
sounds
also the
fantastic.
net zero emission target date. Okay.
Yeah, great. So there are two more questions very similar to each other. One from Sunny Vora of Anugrah Medicine, and other from our own Mr. Visuvaran Chakravarti. Very similar questions. So the first one is, what is your advice for the new people looking at rural marketing, and how do you see the role of rural marketing agency? And the second question is, there's a large number of students studying rural marketing in their MBA curriculum. Is it something which has happened heavily in last decade or two? And some of them must be watching the show, so few points of guidance for them. So very similar questions. Would you like to take it?
Okay.
Both the questions
Okay,
start.
let me say that, rural marketing is a subject of interest. I remember when I started the course 20 years ago, I actually put the course together 21 years ago, started the course 20 years ago at ISB Hyderabad first, and then took it to Mohali in the last 6 years. If you look at it, the program, not the first rural marketing course put together at a B school at all. Every B school had a rural marketing program. But the only problem was the IRMA program was the solid program, which was appreciated the most. Everywhere else, people did it, as a lark and, weren't too engrossed, too involved. What really happened is in the last 20 years, I have seen the interest in this course growing. I still remember when I started the program, I had 32 people at the ISB Hyderabad campus on my program out of a batch size of about 100 people. Okay. And that batch size grew and grew. And, it grew to such an extent that, every year I would have to teach 3 sections of classes, and each class would be about 65 to 72. So you see the interest deepens because business pushes that interest. So to those students who are studying rural marketing, please study it. But then the point is, rural marketing is not and cannot be taught in a classroom. You have to get out of there. You have to get out of there, be there in the rural market, and to understand the rural market. Rural marketing cannot be taught out of a textbook. It has to be learned, experienced. All India Radio, once upon a time, wanted its station directors to understand rural because they were doing Vivid Bharati programs, which was going on. You know what All India Radio did 35 years ago? They sent their station directors into rural markets and said, go spend 3 months in rural markets to understand rural. These people cribbed because they came from the big cities. They had to have all the nice toilets, all the, comforts, creature comforts. They went in there. 3 months later, they came back chastised. They came back more real, and they brought in programming for All India Radio, which was stupendous. And All India Radio still continues to be one of the epoch radio stations that rural India listens to. So I think, if you want to create stuff, you have to be there and be there at the forefront of it all and create new stuff. So the future for rural marketing is excellent, is great. Rural is not a subject which has an expiry date in India, in Vietnam, in South Africa, in parts of China, in Indonesia. and I can take on names of 3 more countries. In these countries, rural is there. And I've taken 2 names, China and India. And that means that's a total of 2.8 billion plus people. And if you add Indonesia, and if you add Vietnam, and if you add the fact that a lot of Western countries are going to adopt rural lifestyles post the pandemic, there are people who have left big city lives in the West and have gone to do farming in rural areas in the United States of America. I have one piece of data ago, 87,300 families left urban America. 87,300 families is a large number over 2 years. An American family is standard three people. Indian census says the average family size is 5.5. 3 into 87,000 and odd people, multiply that, they move to rural areas, homeschooling, home eating, no restaurant food, farming, real holistic life, breathing in the fresh air, doing all things, maybe even using the fields in the morning. I don't know how an American does it, but in India, the best thing to do is that. Okay, now I'm being
Great.
naughty.
I have 2 more questions from the stalwarts of RMI. I'll be quick. I'm mindful of the time. You have to your hard stop. But so the one is from our own Raj Kumar Jha, and incidentally, Raj sir is also working on rural tourism. I mean, his own in his own style.
Excellent.
So what he's mentioning is the advent of startups coming from agri sectors or rural to urban. So uh, he's commenting. I think it's more of a comment that how do you see the prospect of rural to urban, because the speed is it just started, but speed is slow.
Excellent.
And he's also
Yeah.
mentioning
Yeah.
that the Amazons and Flipkarts are delivering to his doorstep in the village. So have we bridged the gap?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Raj is an icon in this space. He's done that, all kinds of things, stuff which has really yanked the rural markets onto a different traction. Raj, your question, if you ask me, I think, it's extremely important to appreciate the fact that marketing models will change, but not startups are hungry people. I do some work with a batch of startups, but there is a guy in Rajamandri who's got a brilliant idea. Okay. And that brilliant idea can actually fructify if he comes to Hyderabad or to Bangalore. And guess what? He decided to come to Bengaluru. My VC ecosystem lives here and rests here. And my VCs don't want to take the trouble of going into rural markets and trying to hunt out ideas. So essentially, I think we need a way of hunting out ideas. And there's a huge opportunity, Raj, particularly in this space, to say that, hey, to do a Shark Tank in rural areas. Okay, well, let's call it a Pomfret tank for rural India. We need, because if we can actually have rural people coming out and doing stuff and getting recognized by VCs who are taken at least to the big cities in rural areas. Take a VC, at least Rajamandri, he'll get a 5-star hotel, he is happy and expose the ideas. So this kind of a thing is something which people like you and I need to activate, because extremely critical to say that talent lies everywhere. The same thing goes for sports, right? In football, some of the best footballers must be living in our villages, but they never ever get recognized. Unless you're seen playing at a match in Bengaluru, and unless one of the big teams and some coach is watching you and you happen to be lucky, you don't get recognized. So talent exists, but startup talent hugely, startup ideas brilliantly. And urban startups have got a huge disadvantage. All urban people think top down, top down. Rural people think bottom up. And I think this bottom up thinking is much more solid than top down thinking. So I think startups, to your question, phenomenal opportunities. But I say it'll take at least 8, 10, 15 years for this to, fructify.
Cool. Yeah. So there's another point which our Sanjay Panigrai ji has posted. He's mentioning about the fund which is coming through Manrega or PMAY and basically reflecting into the rural supply, demand. So consequently, he's asking the how can technology help in the supply chain or the distribution. I think you have touched upon this point in your talk. But any one or two comments you want to? Yes.
Sanjay, a very apt point of yours, because you've seen it happening. If you look at it, there's plenty of money. The per unit kind of a coverage of money for rural markets has gone up dramatically. If it was X at one point of time, it's 2000X today. Okay, which means to say that nothing was going there, next to nothing, and now it's gone to 2000X. And has leakage stopped is the big question to ask. Even if there's leakage, let's say, there's still a 1000 plus kind of a multiple hitting these markets. This is creating prosperity. And this prosperity is bound to cascade. But distribution is a hard nut to crack. And unless we use digital formats, we'll not crack it. Working with drones, let's say, drone tech has advanced in India today. Our law, in fact, I must praise the government of India for being so expansive in its mindset in giving drone tech the go ahead in this country. And this happened about 5 months ago, I think. So if you really look at it, the new laws are very, very clear, and I can do 20 different things with this. So eventually, what was the problem? The problem in the old days was rural markets were distanced. Problem one. Problem two, rural markets are dispersed in the sense that there are 6,43,700 villages, 643,700 villages in this country. They're all dispersed. Problem three, I don't know who wants what where. So there was an asymmetry between supply and demand. There was a demand in rural markets. There was a small farmer sitting in Peddapalli in Andhra Pradesh, and that guy wanted something, and he wanted something called a Gucci bag, handbag. Why not? He's got all the money, but that matching of the Gucci didn't know that he lived there. Gucci didn't know how to get there. Gucci thought markets were dispersed. Today, that asymmetry is lost. So I think e-commerce, assisted e-commerce, platforms where mobile commerce has come in a big way have cracked that. So distribution systems, alternate distribution systems, the stoppage of dependence on the alimentary canal system of distribution, I think, and disintermediation. I think all these will definitely do it. Thanks, Sanjay.
Great. If you have just 2 more minutes, I've got one more question. I mean, there's a question on the chat box, and my last question got 2 minutes. Being a
Okay,
marketeer,
Puneet, just one more question, I think, because I have to get into something else now in a few minutes. But please go.
Absolutely.
Please go.
So just a minute or so. So the question is, is about the marketing campaign and how do you see? And we have seen in the last decade, in the second half of the last decade specifically, the communication per se, the marketing communication is less commoditized. It's more sharper and addressing to the target audience. So what do you see, and how do you see the importance and how the business communication needs to change to stay relevant in the rural markets in the times to come?
Okay. A very quick answer to that would be that, communication that is devised bottom up seems to work much better in rural markets than ever before. So this old business of saying, I would communicate from a big city, and a big city guy is typically in an advertising agency, which is a big advertising agency. And in the big advertising agency, the big city guy who was actually creating that entire copy and creating that entire piece of advertising was possibly very, very English oriented in the old days. Then that changed dramatically, and it changed with a huge impact. And I think Piyush Pandey was one of the first guys, Raj himself, and these entire teams, these entire sets of people changed the mindsets of looking at creatives the way they would go out. If you think Hindi and deliver Hindi, it works. You think Bhojpuri, deliver Bhojpuri works. Think Odia, deliver Odia works. I think this was the key aspect that was looked at. And I think, therefore, bottom-up communication mattered to understanding of the local milieu. It's not the big city guy going into the small village and trying to push something down, but it's the village learning that is actually harvested and taken in creating communication. So communication is now getting back to 1:1. Okay. In the old days, the best way to sell anything to anyone is 1:1. I sit in front of you, Puneet, and I sell you a tractor. That's the best way to do it. But when I can't do it, it's 1:many. That is, I come to a group of 40 people and sell the tractor in a room. When I can't do that, because I can't, I go behind a television screen and make an advertisement and sell to all. Now that's the least efficient of it. Guess what? We're coming back to 1:1. Digital marketing is reinventing 1:1. Digital marketing, my D2C platform, I have built a D2C platform for a tractor company, okay, in rural markets. The D2C visual is seen on Instagram by a rural person, and he goes in the tractor, he clicks on the tractor, he witnesses all the demos of the tractor, and then he fixes an appointment for somebody to come and meet him, and then that is fed to the local dealership. Local dealer goes, clinches the deal, comes up. I think D2C is great. In the future, D2C will become completely seamless, but today we still need a physical interface. Thank you.
Perfect. I think so nice of you, and really appreciate the time, Mr. Harish, you had spent with us. And I am mindful of the fact that I stretched you for 5 minutes extra of your time. But
No,
really,
not
really
an
thank
issue.
you.
Puneet, I just want to say that, if there are any questions anybody has, I'm willing to answer online. If they do say that they were at this RMAI forum, they can mail me at harishbijoor@hotmail.com, or I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you can catch me, on Insta. You just send me the question. I promise to reply to you within 24 hours if you say you were at this RMAI session. Okay.
Great, perfect. So, and really appreciate and thank you very much, and look forward to having more opportunities to speak to you in the future.
Thank you.
And really
Thank you.
appreciate your presence. And
Thank
thank you very much. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.